My daughter-in-law said it plain as day, I whispered, my voice low as if the walls might still carry secrets. She told your father, why waste money on her? She's just an old woman now. She doesn't need flowers. She doesn't even matter anymore. I saw your eyes widen, child, the way only a young ones can when they first taste the bitterness of betrayal. The firelight flickered against your small face, and for a moment I wondered if I should have kept quiet. But no, silence is what makes wounds rot. Tonight, you must hear the truth. That was Mother's Day, not so long ago. I sat at the edge of the porch, watching cars pass on the dusty road. Every horn, every laugh drifting from another family's open windows felt like a knife. Children carrying bunches of tulips. Husbands holding gift bags. The world celebrated mothers, while in that house, the house I helped build with my own hands, I was invisible. You know, I once walked 10 miles in broken shoes so your father could have medicine when he had fever. My soul bled, but I did not stop. I cooked on stoves that smoked the walls black, scrubbed floors until my knuckles cracked. I stretched a single pot of beans to feed a family of 5. I gave them my years, my strength, and in return, I received silence on the one day the world remembers women like me. That evening, when the sun sank low, I heard laughter from the dining room. I walked in quietly, then there they were, my son, his wife, their children. The table was full of roast chicken, sweet pies, gifts piled in the center. She was smiling, unwrapping a necklace. Her children shouted a happy Mother's Day, while I stood at the doorway unseen. No one turned to me. No one said my name. I tell you, child, the sound of their laughter echoed in my bones. Not because I wished for gifts, I never needed shiny things. But to be forgotten, that is a cruelty sharper than hunger. Later, when they had gone to bed, I sat alone in the kitchen. The dishes were mine to wash, of course. The necklace box lay open on the counter, and the light caught the silver chain, mocking me. I pressed my hands against the table, whispering to myself, you are not nothing. You are not gone. And yet, in their eyes, I was. I did not sleep that night. I watched the ceiling as the house creaked. I thought of my own mother, God rest her soul, who raised me with nothing but the hem of her apron and the strength of her back. She used to say, a mother's worth is seen only when she is gone. How I hated those words. But perhaps she was right. The very next morning, I heard a knock at the door. Not the gentle tap of a neighbor, not the hurried fist of a child at play. No, this knock carried weight, like it had come to deliver judgment. My heart leapt. I rose slowly, every bone in me stiff, and went to the door. And child, that knock changed everything. But before I tell you what waited on the other side, you must understand the road that led me there. You must know the storms I walked through, the losses I buried, the battles I fought in silence. Because without those, the knock means nothing. So sit close. Listen with your heart. This is not just a story of betrayal, it is a story of survival. When I was young, life was never kind. We were poor, that poor. My father died in a factory accident when I was only 9. I became the second mother to my younger brothers. I learned to cook before I learned to write, learned to mend clothes before I learned to braid my own hair. While other dolls played with dolls, I was begging for bread at the market. By 16, I was married. Not for love, but for survival. Your grandfather was a good man, Dostan. He worked himself raw in the fields, his back bent like the wheat he harvested. I loved him in the way people love their lifeline, because without him, I would have drowned. Together we scraped by, raising your father and his sister in a house with more leaks than walls. I remember nights when the rain came through the roof, soaking the bed. I would press my children to my chest, whispering songs so the storm would not frighten them. Your grandfather would place buckets around the floor, then sit down, defeated, his clothes clinging to him. And I would smile through it, because what else could I do? If I broke, the whole family broke. We survived sickness, hunger, winters so cruel our breath froze in the air. I lost a baby once, in the dead of January. I buried him with my own hands, no coffin, only a blanket. I never told anyone how the earth cut my fingers, how the silence of that grave nearly swallowed me whole. I just carried on, because there were mouths to feed, fires to light, wounds to mend. That is the weight a mother carries, child. Invisible until someone decides it is no longer needed. So when my daughter-in-law looked at me and said I did not matter, she was wrong. She may not see me, but I am here. My story lives in these walls, in the soil outside, in the blood that runs through your veins. And that knock, oh, child, that knock was the moment life turned. It was the sound of truth demanding to be seen. But that part of the story will come. Tonight I only want you to understand the beginning. The pain of being forgotten. The sting of being erased. And the strength it takes to rise anyway. Now, hold my hand tighter. Do you feel the veins, the scars, the roughness? Every line tells you where I've been. And by the time I finish this story, you will know what it means to carry love, loss, survival, then hope in one heart. That is how my fight began. That is how the woman they called useless learned to stand taller than all of them. That knocked, child, it thundered through my bones. I froze with my hand on the doorknob, my breath caught halfway in my chest. For a moment, I thought perhaps it was death itself, come to claim the forgotten old woman who had outlived her worth. But when I opened the door, it wasn't death. It was life, raw and uninvited. A man stood there, tall, with a face lined from years of labor. His cap was pulled low, and in his hand he carried a folder thick with papers. He looked at me like he already knew my story. "Mom," he said, his voice deep but kind. "Are you Mrs. Miller?" I nodded, though my throat felt dry as ash. He shifted, cleared his throat. "I'm from the town records office. I came to deliver documents about the property. Your son filed something yesterday. It concerns you." My knees nearly gave way, but I steadied myself against the doorframe. In that moment, I knew the betrayal was deeper than being forgotten on Mother's Day. They weren't just erasing me from the table. They were planning to erase me from the very house my hands had built. I invited him in, though shame burned in me. The kitchen was bare, only a kettle on the stove. He laid the papers down, and as I read the words, my heart cracked open. Transfer of ownership. My son wanted to sell the house. Sell it while I was still alive, while my feet still walked its floors. I did not cry in front of that man. No. I pressed my lips together, nodded politely, and said thank you. But inside, the storm raged. After he left, I sat at the table, the papers heavy beneath my palm. I thought of every wall I had scrubbed, every board I had painted, every night I had rocked my babies to sleep in the upstairs room. All of it ready to be sold like it meant nothing. Do you know what that kind of betrayal feels like, child? It is not a knife. No, knives are clean. This was a slow fire, eating through everything I thought was mine. That night I could not close my eyes. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, remembering the day your grandfather and I first stepped into this house. It was not much then, just 4 walls leaning toward collapse, the roof patched with tin. But he looked at me, his eyes shining, then said, "Mary, this will be ours. We will make it a home." And we did. With our bare hands, we did. We painted the walls, dug the garden, raised the fence. I hung curtains sewn from scraps. He fixed the chimney so our children would not choke on smoke. It was here we dreamed, here we starved, here we celebrated every little victory life allowed us. And now, my own blood wanted to take it away. In that silence, I thought back even further. Back to when I was a young mother, when your father was just a boy. There was one winter, bitter and long, when we had nothing but cornmeal and beans. Your father cried from hunger. His cheeks were hollow, his lips dry. I remember sleeping out in the snow, barefoot because my shoes had holes. I walked to the mill, begged for work, and they gave me scraps. I carried home a sack no bigger than a child's pillow. But to me, it was gold. I made bread with shaking hands, tears falling into the dough, and when I placed it on the table, I saw my children's eyes light up. That look, child, that look kept me alive. All those sacrifices, all those nights I went hungry so they could eat. And now the same boy, my boy, signed away the home that held those memories. It nearly broke me. But then I remembered something your grandfather once said, long ago, on a night when we had nothing but fate to warm us. He said, Mary, never let them see you fall. You hold your head high, no matter how heavy it feels. So I sat straighter. I folded those papers, tucked them in my apron pocket, and whispered to myself, not yet. Not while I still breathe. The next morning, I acted as though nothing was wrong. I poured their coffee, fried their eggs, even smiled when my daughter-in-law chatted about her new necklace. They did not know I had the papers. They did not know I knew. That was my power, child, silence. But silence is not surrender. Oh no. I began to plan. While they whispered about selling, I remembered every deed, every paper your grandfather had signed before he died. I remembered where he kept them, hidden in the cedar chest in the attic, beneath quilts I had stitched by hand. When the house was empty, I climbed those stairs, my knees aching with each step. I opened that chest, and there it was, the original deed, with your grandfather's name and mine. My hands shook as I held it, the ink faded but strong. That paper was proof that this home was still mine. I pressed it to my chest and wept, child. Not out of weakness, but out of fierce relief. They could plan, they could whisper, but they could not erase me. Still, the battle was not over. I knew there would come a day when truth had to be shown, when silence had to break. And oh, when that day came, it would not be quiet. That is what the knock began. That was the moment I saw their betrayal not as a wound, but as a challenge. And your grandmother, child, has never turned away from a fight. Now lean closer. For the next part of the story is not about loss, it is about the fire inside me that refused to die. It is about how a woman everyone thought was useless stood up, not just for herself, but for the life she had built with her own hands. And when I tell you what happened next, you will see why they never forgot me again. Child, every story has a day when truth can no longer hide in shadows. Mine came on a Sunday morning, clear and bright, the kind of day that fools you into thinking the world is kind. I had them downstairs, your father and his wife. Their voices were low but sharp, slicing through the silence of the house. I crept down the stairs, quiet as breath, and stood at the edge of the kitchen doorway. Once it's sold, my daughter-in-law was saying, her gold bracelet catching the light, we can finally move into the new house. Modern, no drafty windows, no creaking floors. And she'll be fine, we'll find somewhere for her. Find somewhere for me. Like I was a piece of old furniture, to be carried out and left on the cab. Your father sat there, his head in his hands, silent. For a moment, I prayed he would rise, slam his fist, tell her no. But when he finally spoke, his words fell like stones. You're right. She won't understand, but it's for the best. The best. For who? Something in me hadn't. The time for silence was done. I stepped into the room, the deed clutched tight in my hand. They turned as startled, as if I were a ghost. Perhaps to them, I was. You speak as though I am already gone, I said, my voice steady, though my heart beat like a drum in my chest. But I am here. And this house is mine. I laid the deed on the table. The paper, yellowed with age, seemed to burn between us. Your father's eyes widened. He reached for it, but I placed my hand firmly on top. No, I said. Not this time. You will listen. Do you know, child, in that moment I felt taller than I ever had in my life. I was not the bent woman who shuffled with aching knees. I was Mary Miller, who had walked barefoot through snow, who had scrubbed floors until her fingers bled, who had fed her children with nothing but faith and scraps. I looked at my son, my boy I had carried, my boy I had protected, and I let him see the years of sacrifice etched into my face. This deed bears your father's name and mine, I said. We built this house with our sweat, our hunger, our love. You think you can sell it as if it were nothing? As if I were nothing? No. Not while I draw breath. My daughter-in-law's smugness drained from her face. She sputtered, you can't just. But I cut her off. I can. And I will. Because this house is not just wood and stone. It is my life. It is my children's laughter, my husband's dreams, the prayers whispered over empty plates. You cannot erase that to the signature. Silence fell. Heavy, suffocating. Your father lowered his head, shame washing over him like a tide. His shoulders trembled. Finally, he whispered, "Mama, I'm sorry." Oh, child, those words broke me more than his betrayal. For a second, I saw the boy he once was, the boy who clung to my skirts, who begged for stories at night, who looked at me as though I were the whole world. Tears blurred my sight, but I did not let my voice waver. Sorry is a start. But you must remember, a mother is not a burden to be carried off when convenient. She is the root. Without her, the tree cannot stand. He nodded, his face pale, his eyes wet. My daughter-in-law sat stiff, silent now, the weight of her greed exposed in the morning light. I gathered the papers, folded them, and tucked them back into my apron. My hands shook, but not from fear. From release. That day, I did not win riches. I did not win glory. What I won was something greater, the right to exist, to be seen, to be remembered. Later that evening, when the house was quiet again, I sat in my chair by the window. The sun dipped low, bathing the walls in gold. I thought of your grandfather. I could almost hear his voice, "Mary, hold your head high." And I did. Do you see now, child, why I tell you this story? Not to make you hate your father, no. He is a man, flawed as all men are. I tell you so you will understand that life will test you. It will strip you bare, it will push you into corners. But you must never surrender your worth. Love deeply, yes. Sacrifice, yes. But never let anyone write you out of your own story. I reached for your little hand that night, you were so small, your eyes wide with all the innocence of youth. And I felt hope. Because as long as you carry my story, I will not vanish. When the world pretended I didn't exist, I stood up. And when they tried to take everything, I reminded them that I was still here. And now, child, so will you. Wherever life takes you, whatever trials you face, remember me. Remember that strength lives quietly inside you, waiting for the day it is needed. That is how you honor me. That is how you honor yourself. And that, my dear, is why they never forgot me again.